As the title says, this is a history of non-foundation schools, i.e. not Dulwich College, not JAGS, and not Allane's school. Um, the picture you see here is taken at the prep, probably in the early 30s, and shows, I'll come into it in more detail later, but it shows children being dropped off because they did offer a car service at that time, that they would collect your son from home and drop him off at the school. But anyway, what I've done is, to a certain extent, the schools are self-selecting in that I pick the ones with pictures, good pictures, or good advertisements. So I will miss some out. I will start with the earliest ones, but after that, we will be all over the place and we will finish up with the prep at the end. So let's start. The oldest one that I can find is a girls' school run by Rebecca Talk. Here, there's a Sun Fire Assurance record as early as 11th of August 1782. Edward's companion from London to Brightinghelmsholme, London to Brighton, published in the 1790s, but actually surveyed in the 1789, confirms that she was there. And you can see here a lease taken out in 1794 for the house. Now, the house, to be fair, it's sort of hidden behind the pub between Lonsdale Lodge, which is this one, that's Stanley Villa, which are still both still there today, but Lonsdale Lodge a bit round the corner. But that's where they were, between there and the pub. That's where she was. So she's the earliest one I can find back in the 18th century. The next one is Dr. Glennie's Academy in Dulwich Grove in the early 1820s. The way to look at it, this here is Dulwich Common coming into Lordship Lane, slightly different from what's there today. And this was the pub that was rebuilt in the 1780s. And when it went bust, and he took it over and ran it as a school for boys. The most famous pupil is Lord Byron. Most of you know him, but the most, I think, more interesting one is Captain Berkeley, whose claim to fame was pedestrianism. Apparently, in the 18th and early 19th century, fast walking between various points, long distances, hundreds of miles, was a very popular sport, and he was an expert at it, Captain Berkeley. But anyway, Dr. Glennie's Academy, where the Grove Tavern is now. And then we have Dr. Butt's Academy. Now, Eastland's house, he built Eastland's house roughly where Eastland's Crescent stands today in the 1820s. And he ran, again, a small school for boys on the site. Rather nice house, knocked down. The house is still there until the 1930s. At the end, it was used as a residential hotel, but it was there up till the 1930s. And as I say, Eastland's Crescent is where it is today. Now we move back to, you will know this. This is currently the JAGS pre-prep school. St Austin's on the corner of Dulwich Village and Village Way. And that's the only, unfortunately, that's the only well, there are other pictures. We do not have a picture of the previous house that was on the site, but we do know it was called the White House, and then the name changed in the 1880s to St Austin's, and I'm pretty convinced this is where P.G. Wodehouse got the name from, because when he was at the college, studying at the college, it was just coming to the end of being a school. And it had been not so much a school, more a crammer, if you like. But it features another book here. But here you can see it was run by the Reverend Worthington Dunn from 1881 to 88, and then this chap called Harrington from 1888 to 95. And here, to give you an idea of the sort of what they were offering, it was basically a crammer for the army. This one was for the army, as it says here, Woolwich, Sandhurst, and universities. And their adverts, this is how they would, they would put in how good their successes. Well, I don't need to read it to you, you can read it, but here you are, four passed into Sandhurst, one into Woolwich, and three for the army. I'm not quite sure what the professional preliminary is, but it was a crammer, basically for military crammer. But the more interesting crammer was here, the Allison Towers on Dulwich Common. The picture here of Canon Carver, who was the headmaster at Dulwich College at the time, is because the A.W. Hume, who ran this school, was formerly a teacher at the college, and he fell out with one of his fellow teachers, fellow masters, a chap called Marshall, and he sued him for libel. And there was a big court case in 1877 about the college, and it demonstrated how grim things were. I mean, Canon Carver was a real character in charge, but underneath him there was all sorts of things going on. Hume was known as B&S, for brandy and soda, because he was always drunk, and it turned out that a lot of the other teachers were drunk most of the time. And it got to the stage where the wives of different teachers wouldn't speak to each other, and it was a really serious case, which Hume did win. Marshall lost, but he only got awarded 40 shillings rather than the £1,000 he got, and he was sacked basically. And Carver had to sack him, although he was a friend of Carver's, and Carver gave him £300 as a sort of going away present, or as a sort of payoff. And he moved. He was already living, and this is the house. This is between these two houses. This is Allison Gardens, and this is Allison Towers, fairly obviously with a tower. And between that is Allison Grove, and Allison Grove, of course, is still there today. But these houses have well, not that long gone. This one went in the late 50s, and this one went in the early 60s. But again, you can see these advertisements, the sort of thing Hume was offering. I mean, 50 to 65 guineas as a yearly fee um, is quite a lot by the standards of the time. Um, but he was a strange character, and he employed this German captain from the Prussian Grenadier Regiment. Not quite sure what he taught, or perhaps he just taught drill, because drill and sport were quite an important aspect of this. And here you go, in the last 2 years, 113 have passed out. And this is a good idea but he didn't last. He started in 1877. By 1884, he was bust, and he left the area, and the house and contents were sold off. And we don't really know what happened to him after that. But let's changing now to other sorts of schools. This one is Holly Brown, Sydenham Hill. And this one here, this advertisement, you'll see a lot of advertisements, so I'll give you time to read them. There were a lot of people who were providing schools education for the children of Indian civil servants who didn't want to keep them in India, who would bring them home, put them in the school. I mean, thinking about it from today's perspective, you come home from India, what did it take? Well, before the Suez Canal opened, it took 9 to 10 weeks. But when the Suez Canal opened, it was possible to get to India in 3 to 4 weeks. But you generally had to go by train to Brindisi or Marseille first to avoid the weeks hacking down through the Bay of Biscay. But yes, you came home and you were looked after at these pretty grim schools, I think it was. But here you go. She's just offering a bit of uh, governess. She's a governess. And here's Miss Franks. She's a bit cheaper than the other one. And she took 10 young ladies as boarders. Very keen on French and German, less so on science, I think, at the time. But this is a typical girls' school, small girls' school at the top of Sydenham Hill. And here's some other more general advertisements. What we find is that generally, a lot of these schools, both boys and girls, were, how can I put it politely, on the periphery of the estate. The state did allow them on their better areas occasionally, but generally they were outside. I mean, Rosendale Road is, of course, off the estate. Hawarden Grove here, if Robert's there, Robert Holden's there, here's one for you. And you're again in Thurlow Park Road, which is again off the estate. Um, but there were a huge number. And in fact, this chap here, um, no, it's not this one, but it's gives you an idea of the range of schools available. And then we had the Dulwich High School for Girls. There's a rather nice postcard from 1900, 1905. Here it is today. Of course, it's Rosemead School today. And prior to that, it was at one time part of Oakfield. And before that, of course, it was the an acting school before, just after the war. The Dulwich High School for Girls opened in the 1870s and closed in 1938. And here are some interior shots of the classrooms. And here are the girls playing, I assume, netball, probably taken in the late 20s, early 30s, looking at the style of the hair and everything. So that would have been about right. Unfortunately, the Mary Elgar, who was the first headmistress and quite a well-known character, we don't, I have been unable to find a picture of her. So instead, we've got pictures of some of their better known students, particularly with their connections to the spies, breaking the Enigma codes at Bletchley Park. And you've got here Joan Clark, who has a blue plaque now, a proper English heritage blue plaque in Rosendale Road. I think it's 173 or 193. And Mavis Beatty, another one of the code breakers. So Dulwich, I mean, it was a very well-known school at the time, but it seemed to fall off. The 30s, they were struggling, and it closed in 1938 through lack of pupils. Other schools for girls, I'm just dealing with girls at the moment. We've got here the Waldrons at 132. Here's West Dulwich Station and the railway bridge. So that school was in this house, long gone, right on the corner, gone in the 50s. Here, and that one did boys and kindergarten as well. Miss Roberts and Miss Bowditch. And then Miss Roberts and Miss Bowditch moved across the road to 127 Thurlow Park Road. This is now Oakfield, of course, which we'll come on to later. But they ran a school there in the late 30s up until about 1940, 41, called Thurlow Grange. So you get modern education and a good gymnasium and a bit of secretarial courses as well. And there's an interesting point. Escort to and from school can be arranged. But these were quite successful. And here again are some of the girls just about to play netball again, I think. Here doing a bit of gym. I rather like this one of the rhythmic band. This is obviously for the younger children. And here we are playing netball again in the grounds of the 127. Again, this is probably taken late 1930s. They're going back a bit. This was one that the estate allowed in quite a prominent house on Alleyne Park. Here's the original census, 1881 census, and a chap called John Peter, who had a school in Brighton, who had run a school in Brighton, and his daughter, why they moved from Brighton to Dulwich, I'm not quite sure, but daughter Mary set up this school here in this house at 10 Alleyne Park. Demolished for in the late 1950s for Kingsdale School. You see this advertisement in the Morning Post, 1877, so quite early. Looking for extra pupils. Again, this thing about language, which we'll come on to shortly elsewhere. But you know, £200 a year when a house cost you, you could, well, not a house like this, but a house in East Dulwich cost you 250, 300, £350 a year, pounds. That's a lot of money. Anyway, there we go. And there, but it didn't last. By 1896, she again was bust, and you know, a tenant, the tenant Brown, chap called Brown, that was the actual leaseholder, and she was unsuccessful in carrying on a school. But this is a more interesting. This is Ashbourne Lodge up in well, it's the house is Birchwood on Sydenham Hill, one of the big old houses on Sydenham Hill. They've been running this school, Ashbourne Lodge it was called, Anglo-German College for daughters of, they were always daughters of gentlemen. They were never daughters of peasants or people who weren't. And Miss Fenton, it was actually Fraulein Bristow who were running it, hence the word Anglo-German. And they'd been running in Forest Hill for some time until they moved here just before you could say not a good move, just before the First World War. Again, daughters of gentlemen. And they were saying how marvelous the house was and how great the grounds were, you know, tennis courts, woodlands to walk through. You know, they were really pitching it quite hard. But unfortunately, of course, an Anglo-German school was not a great thing in 1914-15, and the school closed very soon after the outbreak of First World War, and Miss Fenton and Fraulein Bristow disappeared. Another one who was less suffered less from German prejudices was Anita Henkel, with Miss Anita Henkel. Again, daughters of gentlemen, you see. Henkel came to, not quite sure why it's so many Germans running schools for English girls, but anyway, she came to Dulwich in about 1900 and tried to buy the woodlands on the corner of Thurlow Park Road or Dulwich Common and Alleyne Park, but she was unable to complete the lease. But she managed to acquire here Homedale, which is 44 Dulwich Wood Avenue. And again, languages. She was obviously quite a character. And funny enough, we had one of our recent inquiries for Local History Group was one of her I say relatives, hardly relatives, one of her descendants or descendants of the family. But here's the house, substantial house. Here are the girls in the house. Here are the girls playing tennis rather than netball. But yeah, she was again successful up until the First World War. And then it became a hospital. It became the Norwood Hospital during the war, and then after that became a kindergarten, a teaching college for kindergartens. And this is one. This is the Glen Shee House School now. Moving. This is quite interesting. This is going over to Dulwich Lodge or Surrey Lodge or Ellison Lodge, depending on. But basically, where the Judith Kerr School is at the moment, the original house on the site, Dulwich Lodge, is here. I mean, this school is in the 1930s, but it had been a school. There had been schools on and off in this building since the 1870s, through the 1870s into the early 1880s. Before in 1890s, of course, the building became a home for what was then called inebriated women, or it's the Church of England. It was a temperance home, Church of England home for inebriated women. But that's got nothing to do with the school. But anyway, here we are, the school. And the two ladies who ran this later ran the bookshop, according to Brian Green, in Dulwich Village. But I'm going down now to younger girls. Now, here we are at the Woodlawn School, 101 Dulwich Village. Here's 101 Dulwich, taken in the 50s, a colorized version. And it was there from about 1895 in the garden and in the basement. The school was run there, not in the house. Somebody else lived in the house. And here are some of the children and the teachers um, in the open air schools, nothing new. It's all here. And they later moved to the old grammar school here, and they were there before they closed from about 1917, 1918 to 1920. And this is an old shot, obviously taken where you've still got the milepost there. Now, this is another one. You're going to say the poor woman's had her head cut off, and this is true. Unfortunately, this is the only photograph I have of the delightful Miss Ho. I'm assured it is Miss Ho because one of the girls in this picture contacted us about a couple of years ago um, to tell us she actually lived in the village to talk about this, and she provided this photograph of Miss Ho. And this was Miss Ho's little 12 school from the 20s to the 60s. It was at 90 Croxted Road, and difficult to get a picture of 90 Croxted Road. There's a huge number of trees in front of it. But she was obviously quite a character, and there were 12 little girls. And here you've got it, Victorian governess education. And she was obviously a bit of a flapper. And her teaching methods, there are still people living in Dulwich today, Dulwich Village, who went to her school in the 50s, and they remember her very well. Some of you will remember there was an article in the journal a few years ago now, all about it. But yes, so there were lots of these kinds of small 10, 12, 15 student schools. And this is another one of which you don't uh, have the picture here. This is of the other side of Croxted Road, if you like, the odd side, whereas Miss Ho was on the even side where the houses are still there. This is the odd side. The houses have all been demolished. But this was St. Arvan's. He'd moved from 115 to 51 Croxted Road. But I quite like this one. Backward boys pushed for entrance. And again, individual attention, small classes, just like private schools are sold today. Now, changing to boys' schools, this is Fairfield School in Champion Hill. Again, around the turn of the century, well, turn of the last century, so around circa 1900, in one of the big old houses on Champion Hill, number 107. Here's another one, the Sydenham Hill School. This is the Sydenham Hill, the road down where you travel down now to get to Lordship Lane with the traffic lights at the bottom, and there's the various social housing estates on the left. But again, big house right on the edge of the estate, um, taken, yeah, public school entrance scholarships, Royal Navy. Again, they're selling, this is the sort of pitch, it's high above sea level, so the air will be good. And here you've got electric light and central heating. So that's, for the 30s, 20s and 30s, that's pretty good. And then this house goes down in Lordship Lane. This is 508 Lordship Lane. Not in great, when this photograph is taken, it's obviously not in great condition. But you could be trained more at other types of schools. This chap called Ellis Mardland was training older children for work. And now we're moving to Oakfield. Now, as many of you will know, now called, recently taken over by Elaine's School and now called Elaine's Oakfield. But it has been going a long time as Oakfield for a number of different owners. This is the garden view taken about 1900, 1905. And it's basically two houses which were combined into one. And here's some of her advertisements. And it was a Miss Adams. And you could see that she would go around the country seeking pupils. Here she is in Warwick in 1887. and she'll be at the Warwick Arms Hotel and the Manor House Hotel to see. She's very being very proactive um, about getting pupils. But this is way, and it's even better because this actually gives you details of the teachers and what they're teaching. And the sort of things they would be taught: music and harmony, drawing and painting, dancing, drill. Nearly all schools had drill, and of course you had a an ex-army man to do that. Music, singing, and always German and French, and a bit of Latin. But yes, languages were obviously this is what young ladies should know. They should be able to speak French and German. When Miss Adams sold the school off, she sold it to these two ladies here, Miss Westall and Miss Bakey, who is French, I think. Um, and here you go, daughters of gentlemen. Um, yeah, so this was in Miss Adams is in the 1880s, 1890s, and she sold up, and these ladies are in the 1900, 1920s, 1930s. Um, by the 1940s, Oakfield had been taken over by this chap here, William Moffat Livingstone. Again, don't have a photograph, unfortunately, but this is a shot of the school taken in of the school pupils. Now, they had both boys and girls, but they were divided into separate, almost separate schools. Wasn't more than separate classes. And this is taken in 1950. Not far off today. Of course, famous pupil of Oakfield School is Michael Crawford. Um, but Livingstone had been at the prep. He'd been a teacher in the prep, and when the prep moved from their site in Alleyne Park out to Wales at the outbreak of, or to Cranbrook in Kent and Wales, the outbreak of war in 1939, he stayed on. He just got married, luckily to a fairly wealthy lady, or from a lady from a wealthy family, and he was able to set up his own school and purchase Oakfield, and he ran it well into the 1960s, 70s. But this is interesting. This is a picture of the girls' side, and this is taken in 1951. And this is, of course, Norma Major. So they're the wife of our former Prime Minister. But yeah, all girls all sitting cross-legged in the. I mean, those of us of a certain age will, yeah, it's very familiar. 1950s. But let's move on a bit now to Brightlands. Now, the difficulty about dealing with Brightlands is there are two Brightlands. Brightlands was split. Some of Brightlands becomes Dulwich College Prep School, and some of Brightlands becomes Brightlands, which was the old school on the corner of Dulwich Common and Gallery Road. Now, Brightlands started in 1874 in Rosendale Road, being set up by Miss Elizabeth Shorter. Now, it's almost impossible to work out exactly which house she used for two reasons. One, when she started, all the houses had names. Then the houses were numbered. And then after that, they were all renumbered differently. So it's very difficult to decide which is which. But my best guess is one of these houses was where the school started. And she moved. Well, here we are. And this is the Brightlands that was set up on the corner of road. She's not, and it's set up in 1895. The first, although she's sort of originally there, it's now this chap Collins who did it. And this building is now being converted, still there. And it was the Dulwich College Prep boarding house for many years after World War II. And they handed it back 5, 6, 7 years ago. And the estate have finally got permission to turn it into block of flats, turn it into flats, and build a couple of houses in the garden. But it was a school from 1895 till about 1940. Here's some of their adverts. I mean, it was pretty upfront. It was preparing boys for the college. And again, you see, careful attention to cricket, football, drilling, games, pretty flexible on joining. This was their sort of leaflet. And these are some of the various headmasters. Here is some of the internal shots. And what's interesting, these are postcards. And what's interesting is that the headmaster, Vivian McLaughlin, and then Duckworth, used postcards to communicate with parents. So he could, I mean, this is perfectly reasonable postcard to send somebody's parents, but this one, it's almost, I mean, he sent the postcard and it was delivered the same day, by post to tell the parents what was going on. Uh, but a more interesting postcard is this. This is a shot which the people, which you look at the trousers they're playing in, which is possibly one of the earliest shots of people playing football in Dulwich. This is about 1905. Um, so that's quite an interesting historical. And again, there would be that was a postcard which the headmaster would send to. And here, this is one of the headmasters. This is Duckworth. This is him here, and the school in about 1913. Um, yeah, I mean, love the hats on the ladies. So we're going back now to different Brightlands. It's still there, but we're going now to Dulwich College Prep School. Now, this house here is number 71 Elaine Park, still here. And this is where Brightlands moved, where Miss Shorter moved um, in the 1870s and set up her school in this house here, in this semi-detached house. Uh, it was built by a builder called George Ward, the two semis, and he was in liquidation at the time, so she got a very good deal. So she was going along here when the Dulwich College, when the master at Dulwich College, a chap called Weldon, um, was keen to encourage, shall we say, other prep schools other than Brightlands, to be set up to feed pupils into the college. And he got this chap here, Thomas Henry Mason, to set up what was the Dulwich College Prep School. I mean, they made great, both the college and the prep, or Dulwich Prep and Senior as they are now, make great pains to say they are not connected. And of course, they aren't. But they were originally set up by the headmaster of the college, and they were positioned, they started here and then moved to here, where the Allane's Head is, where the Allane's Head pub. And that's when the Brightlands here moved to the Brightlands we saw back on Dulwich Common, and the Dulwich Prep School was here. So they were here for a while in a couple of the houses here. Then they moved over the road a bit temporarily before ending up here. And this is a shot taken up Allane Park, I don't know, about 1905. You can still see the road is on, the pavements are made up. So you've got granite curbs and you've got paving slabs, but the roads themselves are not made up, are not tarmacked. You can see the gas lights. And in fact, you can see this is pretty much what's there today. And you can see Mallinson, who was then the headmaster, took over these two houses here, 42 and 44, to move the school up from down the road. The college were happy enough to, sorry, the estate were happy enough to let him have it. And there's the shot. There's the taken, I don't know, possibly in the 1920s of the school. Not too different today. And here we are, taken from Allane Park. I think it's slightly more glam now, less trees, much better fence. And here he is with the borders. That's the Reverend Leak. who was the headmaster at the time. Yeah, there's Leek in the middle, and senior masters and the senior boys in 1930. And this is the advert. This is the advert you would have seen at the beginning. And this is, sorry, this is the picture. And this is the advertisement where it says school car is available, conveyance of its pupils. And again, public schools, brackets, Dulwich College and the Royal Navy. And of course, the kindergarten for the smallest boys in a separate building and in charming surroundings. Very few. I mean, to be fair to the prep, they didn't advertise. They must have been going. This is the early 30s, so perhaps they're going through a slightly harder time. But generally, unlike other schools, they didn't advertise to any great extent. And this here is the junior section. These are taken in 1939 when the school had expanded and built what were for the time very modern, contemporary, very advanced facilities. As many of you will know, the headmaster at the time, house, 6 pillars up on Sydenham Hill. So he was a sort of modern architecture fiend. And he employed the same architect who built his house there to build these. I mean, they've long gone now, but they were published quite extensively in the architectural press. And people said this is the future. And if you think of post-war schooling, the Hertfordshire schools post-war, this is very, very much like how they were. But to finish off, something completely different. We're going to Lapswood and the Sunshine Susie. I'll leave you a little time to read the blurb here. We have a picture here of Queen Mary. Visitor Queen Mary was in Dulwich quite a lot. As you know, she came to look at the rhododendrons in Dulwich Park, but she also visited Lapswood. This is in the early 30s to meet the girls, the Sunshine Susies. And apparently, I think it was 1932 she came, and the summer of 1932 was particularly hot. And when she went away, she then sent them an electric fan to keep them cool. And here's Lapswood itself. This was long gone now, and it's now part of Dulwich Wood, but it was there until the late 50s. But yes, the Welsh girls teaching, singing all the time. I mean, from today's perspective, it's a little bit dubious, but perfectly acceptable in the 1930s.